Well, hello there and welcome again to Rare Classic Cars. Today we're going to talk about what I at least think is really the best full-size Chevrolet ever made. And in the context of the whole Chevrolet portfolio, of course, there are some really super famous Corvettes, Camaros, Chevelles, and those are great, bar none. But if you really want the best full-size Chevrolet, I think that this is it. And I would say in general, the 1965 to 70 model years for Chevrolet were really the best that they ever produced. You have relatively modern brakes, power steering systems, and certainly plenty of acceleration from the powertrains under hood, and just absolute smoothness and quiet when you drive them. So some people are going to say, well, full-size Chevrolets, what about the 55, 67? You know, those are nice cars, certainly have good style to them. But I got to tell you, I like this a lot better. And a 283 or a 265 cubic inch small block versus what's under hood in this car, which we'll talk about in a moment, I take this. So just a little bit about the Caprice. The Caprice was introduced partway through the 1965 model year as an up-level trim on the Impala. The interior was done by GM interior designer Blaine Jenkins, who also did the 1967 Toronado interior update of the original 66. He did the 1972 Olds 98 Regency. Also did the early 90s Corvette interior, among many others. And if you see button tufting on a General Motors interior, chances are he at least had a hand in the design or influenced it, as was the case with the Caprice. And as I said, it came out partway through the 65 model year. 1966 was really the first full model year of the Caprice, and this is a 1970 model. So this honestly is my favorite model year for the Caprice, and it's debatable. I mean, I love the hidden headlight Caprices of the late 60s, although the 69 with the big loop bumper to me looks a bit heavy-handed. Some people really enjoy the curved backlight on some of these Caprices that carried through into the early 70s. I don't particularly care for the super glassy upper and the very formal angular waterline, you know, and D-pillar on those cars. I actually like the four-door hardtops better than the two-doors in those later 60s years and into the 1970 model year. But 1970 was also a very special model year because it was the first year of the 454 cubic inch engine under hood. Previously it was a 427 cubic inch engine, and this is the only year for the premium fuel high compression 10.25 to 1 454. 1 year later, it would become a low compression engine that had to run on unleaded gasoline. So this is really your only choice for the model years in terms of the high compression, absolute great horsepower, big block Chevrolet V8. And there were plenty of powertrain choices offered on the Caprice in 1970. Came standard with a 250 horsepower, 350 cubic inch engine with a two-barrel carburetor. There was an optional 300 horsepower 350. Then there was an optional 265 horsepower two-barrel regular fuel 400 cubic inch small block, not to be confused with the 400 or 402 big block. It's the topic of a whole nother video. Then there was 345 horsepower or 454, which is what this car has. And then there was the top dog 390 horsepower 454. So this vehicle, I acquired it a couple years ago in Ontario, Canada. I had seen it for sale over the years, and you know, the guy wanted quite a bit of money for it. And it looked pristine, and I've never owned a big block Chevrolet before this. I've owned big block Olds, Buicks, Pontiacs, Cadillacs. Somebody is going to say there's not a big block Pontiac or Olds. Okay. I've also owned obviously the 440 Chryslers and the 460, 429 Ford engines, 462 Fords, 430 Ford MEL engines. So I've owned lots of big blocks, but I never have a Chevrolet big block, and I really wanted one, and I really wanted a 1970 model year, particularly because, as I mentioned, it's the only year of the high compression engine. So this had been for sale in Canada for a number of years, and finally the Canadian dollar had depreciated to a point, and the seller's desired price had also come down, and the confluence of those factors allowed me to strike a deal with him. So I bought it, imported it here to the US. It is a Canadian car, and I have the GM Canada records on this. This car is one of about 50, that's it, that were made and sold with a 454 under hood. That's all they sold in Canada, 50 of these. So it was originally a funeral procession car, a flower car, and in Quebec. and then it eventually made its way into the hands of collectors, and then finally on its way to me. So pretty decently optioned car. Has power windows, tilt wheel, AM, FM, power seat. The one thing that it doesn't have is, of course, because it was from Quebec, air conditioning. But who cares? You've got hard top, no pillar, beautiful breeze coming through here, and I just don't drive it on a 90-degree summer day. So drive it on a nice spring or fall day. Here we're entering fall, so perfect time to get this car out. And it's really, I would say, a special automobile, not just because of the engine, but also this full-size chassis, to my mind, is the best General Motors full-size chassis that they made. The 65 to 70 cars drive supremely well, feel like they're rock solid, and the next year, the very next year, 1971, and that 1971 to 76 generation, they just feel loosey-goosey and squishy and roly-poly. They're just the antithesis of this. And I love the way, in particular, the 72 Caprice looks. But this car, to my mind, has the great confluence of factors, bringing it all together for what I really desire. Great engine, high compression 454, great chassis, super solid, full perimeter frame chassis. Great brakes. This car's got power disc brakes up front. Excellent variable ratio power steering. General Motors had the best steering gear in the business. And so let's take the camera off and walk around a little bit and discuss a little bit more about this car. You can see how beautiful the interior is. It's a wonderful color combination of black exterior paint, which is all original, and a blue cloth interior, and the combination is just stunning. Let's take a look. All right, so let's take a walk around of this 1970 Caprice. I really like the front end. Some people say it's plain. It definitely is a bit plain, but I enjoy it. It's got this horizontal theme to the grills, a little bit of the egg crate pattern, although very different from what the Cadillacs were using. Kind of a major minor theme going on, with the major theme being these horizontal bars, kind of a minor theme with the vertical bars. A little bit of a 64 Cadillac front end to it, with these fender tips extending further out, or I should say the midsection here between the fender and the hood where they meet up, extending further out than the fender tip or this corner of the hood here. I think it's a pretty handsome design. And you can see this is a special car in particular because many of these came with 350 cubic inch engines. This has a big block under the hood. Also has the rally wheels, which have the sombrero hat, as some people refer to it, and then this trim ring. This is not a full wheel. It's basically a trim ring. This center hat portion, which you remove to remove the lug nuts, and then it's just a standard wheel underneath. Brilliant way to dress up a cheap wheel. Even these things like this bumper up here is a single piece bumper, and the bumper is just this top portion. This lower portion here is a valence panel, and these gills here, as I like to call them, are just the valence panel folded over a little bit 3 times. So relatively cheap way of doing this, but it looks good. Here, though, I think is really where this car shines. Great kind of button tufted interior, similar to the Barcelona chairs. That was Blaine Jenkins' original inspiration for this car, as well as the 92 Regency. And yes, this is faux wood grain, but it looks very tasteful, and this was not cheap to do back in the day. That was relatively expensive. And fortunately, this car is in beautiful shape with the dash panel completely uncracked, the interior not faded. It was always loved garage. Good back seat room. The front seat is all the way back. The bottom bolsters on these are very long as compared to today's cars, where this bolster would probably be shy by about 2 or 3 inches. So it has overall good room. You can see the rear window defogger, not the defroster. It has a blower type rear window defogger in it. And an overall handsome roof line, as opposed to the very formal D line that the coupes had. This 4-door has a really nice backlight with a rake to it. Out back we have Chevrolet was doing on the upper trim models the 3 taillight theme. In these years that continued on for a number of years, even all the way into the 90s on the Lumina. But an overall handsome design. And then in the driver's seat, the steering wheel in this car is in great shape, as is the dash. As I mentioned, it's a no AC car, so there's no vent there. It does have these vents for just fresh air, and it's got 2 poles down there. One for a vent that's in the kick panel, and then a separate one for this one. It has that on both sides. You can see the 2 poles there. This does have an interesting climate control setup. Here, in order to operate the fan, you move this all the way over here, and then it'll start kicking the fan on low, medium, and high. It's kind of goofy. This is, of course, the temperature switch here. This is for the defroster. So this 3 setup, it's all done with Bowden cables, and I'll just call it an interesting choice of how to operate the overall HVAC system, but it works. Works just fine. This car does have the original Chevrolet floor mats. It's in really nice shape. And 46,000 original miles. This does even have a map light here. Can't really see it in the daytime, but you switch it on there at the base of the light here, or it's at the base of the mirror. Let's take a quick look under hood, and then we'll check out the trunk as well. Great door panels, by the way, on these. Very rich looking. And the doors on these close very well, too. But this is really the star of the show for this particular Caprice. And that's this 345 horsepower big block V8 under hood. And look at how clean this car is. And it's just wonderfully clean. I haven't detailed under here. It does have a quadrajet carburetor. As I said, this was one down from the top dog engine. This is a 345 horsepower 454. There's a 390 horsepower as well. Let's start it up so you can hear the sound of a big block in the morning. I'll do my reach-in start here. It's cold, so fast side will be on a little bit. Doesn't that sound great? And I've put duals on this. These actually came from the factory with singles. It does have duals. Just a great sounding V8. Idles so smoothly. Listen to that burble. Don't need a radio in these cars. Just listen to the exhaust. And yeah, it uses some gas, shall we say, but it's not bad. On the freeway, it gets about 15. Around town, 8 to 10, not great. You can see the trunk here with the original spare Firestone H7815 double stripe non-radio. Trunk's decent size in these. I wouldn't call it overly huge. I mean, it's 20 cubic feet. It's huge by today's standards, but back by the time, if you got a Cadillac or something, it was even bigger. This car rides on a 119-inch wheelbase. The Cadillac was on a 129-inch wheelbase. So the wheelbase alone on the Cadillacs was 10 inches longer. But overall, just a spectacular car, and in my opinion, like I said, the best full-size Chevrolet ever made. This car even still has its T3 headlights in it. All four of them. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for a drive. Thanks for watching this video highlighting my 1970 Caprice with a 454. Stay tuned for a video coming soon where I drive the car on the road and talk a little bit more about it. Thanks again for watching. Until next time, take care.